You can see it's a sunny day here on virtual background. And Ron Cooper is in Washington in the blue shirt. And in the plaid shirt is Stephen Howard in Phoenix. Dave Edick is in Eastern San Diego. And Dave is in just north of San Francisco. And welcome to Life. This is the Global TV talk show series about health and wellness and medical science research. This discussion is about Stephen Howard, the author of many books and a good friend, customer. In the book that we're going to be focusing in on, hope you can see it here. It's a great book. Stephen has many books, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Stephen, welcome. And I was up early this morning and I was reading the chapter on page 17 about mindfulness and how it can impact mental health. Would you like to discuss that?
Well, that's a 45-day discussion, I think, but I'll try and shorten it a little bit. Mindfulness is really just understanding the presence, where you are, what's happening around you, what are you feeling, being in tune with yourself, being in tune with your environment, but from a non-judgmental standpoint. And I think that's the critical part that impacts the brain's health. We work and live in such 24/7 nonstop environments. We work and live in those environments. I mean, it's interesting that very few people take time to just stop and pause, reflect. And that's what mindfulness is all about, understanding where you are, what you're feeling, why you're feeling certain things, whether it's positive or negative. I mean, it's not just about negative. It's also, sometimes I often tell people that sometimes the biggest mistakes we make are when we're super happy. I grew up in Las Vegas, and I can tell you the casinos get built there because people think they're on a roll. No, they can't lose. And instead of walking away from the tables when they've got a bit of a winning, they keep gambling because they're on a so-called hot streak, and they're elated and they're giddy, and they make a bad decision. They keep gambling. Well, the odds are in the house's favor, and the longer you play, better the chances are you're going to lose that money that you just won. So that's kind of a nutshell what mindfulness is all about. And I apply it in the book as to how it impacts your decision making. And in that example in Las Vegas, it impacts a bad decision making or less than optimal decision making.
Well, with us is Chris Exline from Ukraine, Western Ukraine, and welcome again, Chris.
Thank you. No, I'm just really excited to hear Stephen's comments and talking about dementia and mind health. And so please, it's a delight to be here, and thank you for bringing up this relevant topic that seems to be increasingly on everyone's mind.
Yeah. Now I sent out that attachment, that page, a website that I built with a link to this broadcast. I sent it to 600,000 about an hour ago across LinkedIn. So I've been getting there's almost now 200 inquiries. But as you can see, we're just a few people here. So they'll all be interested to see the video when it's ready. So, Stephen, you wrote this book, Better Decisions, Better Thinking, Better Outcomes, a few years ago. And yet it's really part of your stable of thinking. Because I've known you a few years now and learning from you almost every time, not almost every time. The thought occurred to me this morning when I was prepping for this that it's a straight line for you. You've been doing this forever, your whole life, this kind of mindfulness. And I could see through your experiences living outside the US for many years in very high level positions, Singapore and other places, as you've told me, that uh, having this conversation today is a real win for me and a global TV talk show, having you talk about all this, and with this distinguished group that's building now, and the subsequent viewership of the video coming up in the weeks and months and maybe even years from now because of this program today. I want to welcome Sandra. Welcome, my friend. This is Sandra in Houston.
Hello.
Hi, Sandra. Meet Stephen Howard, who's the star of today's show.
Hi, Stephen.
Sandra, good to see you
And,
again.
and meet
Likewise.
a handsome guy with a beard in San Francisco. There is my brother Dave. And then below me on the screen is Chris Exline, who I don't know if you've met before. And in the dark blue shirt with the headset is my friend. And thank you, Stephen, for the introduction to Ron Cooper.
Nice to meet you all, gentlemen.
And on the lower left there is Dave Edick. Dave Edick is currently the president of the World Affairs Council in San Diego, has previously many years of international business experience, including Vladivostok. Is that correct?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. What did
Yeah.
you do there? Was that in the fishing business?
No, well, no, it was mostly in the food business, non-perishable foods, import from Western Europe and North America, and wholesale in the urban markets in the Russian Far East.
I see. Okay. And you also worked in Latin America?
I did, yes, the seafood export out of Mexico.
Right. So you like tuna?
We, yes,
Yes. Sushi.
we we were focused more on sardines and uh, other fin fish, but tuna and shrimp for the other guys.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have Tuna Harbor here in downtown
Yeah,
San
yeah.
Diego. Yeah. And we walk on Shelter Island, which is in the harbor, and all the Portuguese influence there. So really, really interesting. And in fact, well, we'll get into that another time. Sandra just got back with her husband after 9 years on international assignment in Eastern Saudi Arabia. Welcome back to the U.S.
Thank you.
Are you
Thank you.
finally settling in after the shock of repatriation?
Believe it or not, it's not yet completed. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot that we're still processing and going through. I mean, just look, I don't have any curtains yet. We're working. I mean, there's a priority, and right now, our priority is our well-being and our parents' well-being right now, right? Because being a part of today's group is because both of us are struggling right now with this new thing that is now we're going through, this new stage in our lives where we're coming back to elderly parents that are now struggling with memory loss. Yep. So thank you, everyone.
Well, my dad didn't know who I was past the last 5 years of his life. He died at 86. My mom lived until she was 95.
92.
92? Yeah, thank you. And a week or 10 days prior to the end, when I was there, happened to be there holding her hand when she passed. But she was playing a crossword puzzle, New York Times crossword puzzle with her doctor. Her brain was great, but her body was not. And
I'm so
so
sorry.
I'm beginning to deal with Joanne's early stage, whatever, cognitive difficulties, and I'm finding it challenging. And we'll get into that another time. But this topic,
Always harder on the caregivers than the patient.
Definitely.
yeah,
Definitely.
and this stuff that you're going to talk about, Steve, and that list that Philip Berry sent me that I put on that website about what not to say, what to say, fabulous, and it actually brought water into my eyes when I read that 20 minutes ago for the third or fourth time. So tell us about your take, Stephen, and why this is an important day for you.
Well, it's an important issue. I got into it because I was the primary caregiver for my father. It's one of the reasons I moved back to the United States from Australia. I thought I'd be there 6 weeks and then 6 months, and it turned out 6 years before he passed on. And he suffered from Alzheimer's, and I was living by myself. And I'll tell you what, it was purely selfish reasons. I started thinking, well, is this hereditary? Am I going to be impacted by this? And, I live alone, and who's going to take care of me? I mean, fortunately, I was there to take care of my dad, but no one's going to be around to take care of me. So as I started researching it, and I was really learned so many new things I learned in high school were no longer correct. And so it became a very personal issue for me. And then as I started talking about it to various business leaders, and their attitude all was, well, Alzheimer's is something I'll worry about after I retire. And the more research I did, I found out this is Alzheimer's, particularly, and a lot of dementia, quite frankly, are lifestyle diseases. They're what we do in our 30s and 40s impacts our risk for dementia in our 60s, 70s, and 80s. So it's not something you can necessarily prevent, and there is a 5% genetic component to it. But the majority of the cases it's a result of our lifestyles, and that impacts our brain. So that's how I got into it. And then as I started talking to leaders, and their attitude is, I'll worry about it when I retire, I said, I got to get this message out. It's not something you wait until you're 65 to start thinking about. You just start thinking about it when you're 35. And I came across, having lived in Asia, I remember an old Chinese quote that said, the best time to plant a tree was 100 years ago. The second best time is today. And I paraphrase that quote, and I say the best time to start thinking about your brain health is in your 30s. The second best time is today, no matter what your age is, because you can take steps today, no matter your age. Obviously, if you're 75 or plus, probably not a lot you can do, but today's the best time you can do to start thinking about it and building and maintaining your long-term brain health. So that was the message behind the book.
So on page 17.
Don't ask me to quote a page. Remember it.
No, I've got it here. So the subchapter is called mindfulness, and you're right. Mindfulness has its roots in Buddhism. However, Buddhism is no more a religion than yoga. You can improve your body and your mental state through yoga without becoming a Hindu. Likewise, you can improve your brain and mental state through mindful meditation without becoming a Buddhist. Think of mindful meditation as a secular methodology for improving your mental muscles and cognitive acuity. Those are huge words. But you also write in that book that board, the CEOs of like John, let's see, Salesforce and Ford Motor Company and some pharmaceutical companies, they're very much talking about mindfulness, and they have an executive who's head of mindfulness thinking in the business context. Would you go deeper on that, please?
Yeah, and the book came out in 2018, so that was came out in October 2018, so it's almost 7 years ago, and it's even more prevalent today in many organizations. of the understanding that mindfulness or quiet time, or, it's okay to take a mental break. I think one of the weaknesses we have in our society, particularly in the workplace. I mean, let's say I report to Ron Cooper over there, and I go to Ron and I say, Ron, I was playing basketball with the guys last night. I kind of strained my lower back. I'm going to go home early this afternoon and take a rest. And Ron typically, as a boss, would say, okay, understand, go do it. But if I go to Ron and say, Ron, my brain is fried. I'm tired. I can't think straight. I'm going to go home as early and take a nap and rest. Most bosses, probably not Ron, maybe, but most bosses would look at me and say, Stephen, pull up your socks, get in the game. Don't be a weakling. You're a professional. You push through it. And that's the problem. We try and push through mental illnesses unlike the way we don't push through physical illnesses, and we can't do that. And we need to, as leaders, we need to understand that people need mental breaks, and it's okay to take a mental wellness day. It's okay to take a couple hours off if you need. It's okay to take a long lunch. A long lunch today should not be a 3 martini lunch. A long lunch today should be a picnic in a park for 2 hours. Preferably with some friends and loved ones, not even necessarily colleagues. Just talk about things. Enjoy. Assuming the weather's good. I'm not suggesting you do this in Chicago in January, but assuming the weather's good, get out, take a long lunch, and then go back. You'll be mentally refreshed.
So,
Stephen, what about meditation?
Well, meditation. I mean, it's interesting you bring that up, David. I just read a book, just finished the book last weekend, actually, by Deepak Chopra's brother, who happens to be a highly skilled liver physician. And he wrote a book called The Big Five. And he basically said there are only 5 things you really need to do to extend your life. And he said it was, a little bit of exercise, nuts, and I'm trying to think of all of them now. I'm going to forget this now, but meditation was one of his 5. And there's a lot of scientific research. When I got into writing this book, I was amazed at the scientific research showing direct links between mindfulness and meditation to thickening of our brain areas. And that's one of the myths I mentioned earlier about high school. One of the myths I learned in high school was our brain stops growing around 20 to 23. And that's not true. That is not true. Brain plasticity continues well into our 60s, early 70s, probably into our 80s and 90s. There haven't been a lot of 80-year-olds and 90-year-olds for research to monitor and test, but our brain keeps growing. And that's something we need to understand. So mindfulness is a way of thickening our brains and creating better synapses, the connections in our brains, which helps keep us cognitively enriched, so to speak. The other I'll quickly throw out, the other very interesting research, this came from UCLA's medical school, was that people who lead sedentary lifestyles actually have smaller brains. Their brains don't grow, and their brains actually will shrink faster. And look, we're all going to have, all of our brains will start to get smaller over time, but at the rate of that decrease can be, I don't want to say controlled, but it can be influenced by a healthier lifestyle than a non-healthy lifestyle. So, and obesity is one of the key factors contributing to Alzheimer's and dementia, because the excess fat that people are carrying around isn't just in their stomachs. That excess fat impacts the brain cells. It also impacts the flow of blood to the brain. The brain is the biggest user of oxygen and blood in our systems. But if we're blocking those blood vessels, or we're blocking our lungs, or making them less efficient to pump, oxygen is going to pump, the lungs are going to pump oxygen to the lungs first and to the heart first. The brain is going to get diminished amount of oxygen. And again, that's going to impact our cognitive abilities and our ability to make decisions. And going back to Ed's first question, this is how I got leaders interested in the subject, because when I could show them the link between stress and brain health to their decision making. It's not something you can put off to your 65. It impacts the decisions you're making as a leader when you're 45 or 50 or 53 or whatever age you are. That's when I got their attention that it's something they need to start thinking about today, not when they retire.
So Stephen, in the book, and related to this, and I'm going to read this because it's really important. Better decisions, better thinking, better outcomes. Is the workplace contributing to the increase of dementia and Alzheimer's disease? You write that stress and our overloaded brains are two of the underlying causes creating negative conflict, tension, and drama in the workplace. Would you go deeper on that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, without a doubt, stress is one of the leading contributors to brain health or lack of brain health. It's one of the key contributors, and much like it is to heart health as well. Our workplaces are full of drama. They're full of stress. They're full of pressure. And again, as leaders, that in retrospect, stress can be good. I mean, athletes perform off of stress. I mean, and we've all gotten into flow when, deadlines can make us not only stressful, that can be good stress, but it's this prolonged stress, this ongoing stress that's a negative impact on our health, our brain health, as well as our physical health. And so the workplace is a huge contributor. In fact, the American Psychological Association said that workplace stress is the #1 stress factor in adult lives in the United States. If you go back to the 70s, stress was like number 3 or 4. For most people in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, their two biggest stress factors were either financial concerns or family relationship issues, whether that was spousal relations, parents with teenagers, children with their adult parents, siblings, whatever it was. It was family relationship stress and financial stress. The research said they went back and forth. During good economic times, family stress was first. During economic slowdown times and recessions, financial stress was first, which made sense. Today, it's workplace stress. And it's a huge contributor to what's impacting everybody and impacting their long-term brain health.
I'm going to read this because it's a tongue twister for me, but not a brain twister. That's why you are the star here today. The book title intrigues me, of course, and it's a great cover. I'm going to hold that up again. Hopefully the camera will pick it up. See the brain in color and black and white. Why the color in black and white?
It's to show the contrast, and if you want, and I actually anticipation of this, I think I pulled up. I can actually share the cover on the screen for you there.
Yeah, there you go. Great.
So it's to show that the calm brain on what screen right, I guess, on the book cover stage left, and the stress brain, the highly active brain on the other side, and just to show the comparison between the two. The title intrigues you. It intrigues a lot of people. Many people tell me the title is wrong. It shouldn't be better thinking first and then better decisions. Produces better outcomes. And the reason for the title was one, to get people's attention. But secondly, the fact is that the first decision we need to make in many situations, but particularly as leaders or as parents, is not to get stressed, is to calm down. Because when we're in stress, the brain goes into what's called binary decision-making mode. And basically what that means, and I'll put this down for you. Binary decision, binary meaning 2. When we're stressed, the brain, to protect itself, limits our choices to 2, A or B, black or white, this or that, 1 or 2. Whereas in many cases, we need to evaluate, particularly major decisions, we need to evaluate option 2B, option 3, option 3A, B, and C. The more options we look at, the more optimal decisions we often make. But when we're under stress, we resort to that binary decision-making mode. So the reason for the title of the book is the first decision we need to make is to learn to respond, not to react to stress. And I learned that in Asia. when I was taking scuba diving, and I became a rescue diver. And so that's like the third level of the scuba diving certificates. I became a rescue diver and a certified rescue diver. And one of the first things they teach us is that not to react, because we can put ourselves or other people in stress. So you hear somebody in the water going, help, 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 and you're on the boat. You don't just jump in the water because you may forget your fin. You may not see that there's jellyfish in the water, which can hurt you or the person you're trying to save. So the first thing you do is you evaluate the environment, what's out there. You know, what do I need to take? Do I need to take rope with me? Do I need to take a buoy with me? What do I need to do? Do I need to take an extra tank with me? You know, what is that person's stress? So you learn to evaluate the situation and respond. And this is why our emergency personnel are called first responders, not first reactors, because the same thing, firemen, when they come on the scene of a car accident, they just don't jump off the truck and go rushing. They stop. Is there smoke? Is there gasoline leaking? Is there a possibility of a split? Are there pedestrians who are hurt? You know, they evaluate first and then they respond to the situation. And that's what we need to do in our business lives and our personal lives as well, is learn to respond by pausing, asking better questions, and looking for more options rather than the binary options that our brain will tend to give us, which is either A or B.
Let's go to Ron Cooper. I know Ron and I have been doing a series, and will continue for the rest of the year and hopefully beyond, on his work, the Cooper culture. But one of the topics that comes right to mind now is about your opinions and your take on people in the military, police and fire, first responders. Would you like to comment?
Well, I'll say it. My life experience tells me there are three professions that have teamwork and trust down to pretty much a fine art. From my perception, that's law enforcement, firefighters, and military. Quite honestly, in many cases, our lives literally depend on each other, how well we work together. And as Stephen was saying, that when as a first responder, whether irrespective of the one of those three professions, we have already frequently thought through how we might respond. We're not going to be always reactive. We hope we can be proactive. And I think a lot of the proactive thinking has everything to do with, as Stephen has said, it is awareness. I am aware of my surroundings, my stress, and so forth. And so as I am aware of those things, I can make better decisions. And if my mindset is positive, I think there's a greater likelihood I'm going to come through with a more positive outcome than I would if I went into a situation with a negative mindset. A whole lot of teaching thoughts go into this. As Stephen was saying, yeah, this could be a nearly 45-hour conversation in teaching, because I know there are a lot of people who are a victim of mindset and so forth. And I use the term victim loosely. We need to be a victor over, but we have to have the right mindset and to be aware of. Now, I know Chris had his hand up and he has an input.
Thank you. One of the things that's been challenging for me out here, Stephen, I'd really appreciate your your advice. Actually, there's a difference between exhilatory or exhilaration stress, the stress that that's engendered by doing something that's exciting, fulfilling, and moving. And then there's existential stress, which is the stress that's engendered by a succession of struggles. And yesterday in my locations, we had the paramedics at two different stores. I think it's unrealistic to ask people here who have family on the front that are dealing with every kind of pressure of an uncertain future, financial pressure. I can't just come in there and say, you know what, all right, team, let's rah-rah through this. I mean, we're gonna PM it, we're gonna W. Clement Stone, we're gonna positive mental attitude through this. The stress and long-term mental health aspects in this country of Ukraine are unquantifiable. What advice would you give me? Again, some of us are positive, some of us are, pessimistic as a bent. We've all had ups and downs, and how do I, as a leader, accommodate and help their stress? Because I can tell you something else, Stephen. These people out here are some of the most unhealthy, physically unhealthy. I mean, their diet, their exercise or lack thereof, the foods they eat, and their waking hours are consumed about, they don't have enough money, and they don't know if they have a future, and they don't know if their families are safe. How, what do you, what, any advice?
Geez, Chris. Yeah, I think
That's why I'm on this program, Stephen. I need some advice now.
no, you need to pause, Chris, and wait.
No.
We need to respond, not react. I think the first advice I would give, if I was coaching you, Chris, I would talk along the lines of, first, let's drop the connotations of positive and negative mindset, and let's talk about growth mindset. And let's talk about the lessons that can be learned, or the confidence that can be built, or and everyone's going to be different, obviously. I mean, there's going to be somebody who's got the family issues to deal with. Others are going to have, they've lost their house, or someone else has lost their child in war. And so each situation is going to be highly different. But how can you, as a leader, work with them to help them understand, or give them the professional help if it's available, which it may not be, but there could be stuff on, if I was there, one of the things that comes to my mind is, are there videos on YouTube regarding mental awareness or resiliency in Ukrainian that you could share at a team meeting, or just send a link to everybody in an email and tell, hey, I came across this, might be worth watching, sort of thing. But, these situations, war situations, are obviously very different. I mean, the fires in Southern California. I mean, I lived in Australia at a time when my neighbors got devastated by the fires out around Melbourne at one time. These are different situations. These are crisis situations that things don't apply. But yeah, I would say, let's talk about growth mindset. Let's be future focused. Small steps, baby steps. I mean, let's not go in there with rose-colored glasses and say everything's going to be wonderful, and let's not try and have happy days 7 days a week. But can we have one happy day a week, or one contented day? Maybe happiness is too far of a bridge too far, so to speak. But can we have at least a contented day, or a peaceful day, one day at a time? The other thing I would highly recommend, Chris, is you talk to whatever religion is prevalent in those neighborhoods, whether it's Catholic or the Russian Orthodox Church, or Jewish, or whatever it happens to be, and whether you can get any of them involved, and whether any of them even have the skills to go through this as well. I mean, you're facing a crisis situation over there.
It's really interesting, and thank you, because on the one hand, our business is doing very well. Our store expansions are doing well. Our profitability, our cash conversion, all the business metrics and customer deals. So we have a growth story, and I know that the employees are not relieved, but they enjoy being a part of something that's positive. But then on the converse, I can't come across as too positive. I mean, I can't come across as like, yeah, isn't this great? I'm just so happy to be here. This is just fantastic for us. I mean, you can't do that, because then you're not a leader, and you've lost all sensitivity to what people are going through. And, as a company, we've just decided, not to even question if somebody asks for a personal day, just give it to them. I mean, no questions asked.
Absolutely. I think, and that's the best thing you do. And I don't, again, being future focused, being optimistic, is good. And celebrate those small wins, celebrate as a family, keep building those family connections, so-called family connections, but those work relationship connections, those might be the most powerful connections that your staff has right now, because their family connections may be being devastated. Their neighborhood connections may be devastated. I mean, it's not the same situation, obviously, but interestingly, I had a conversation with somebody a few weeks ago in a workplace that was highly politically divided in the United States. And he was trying to figure out how to bridge that divide between some very hardcore people on the right and some very hardcore people on the left, and how it was impacting, creating drama and conflict in his workplace. And I said, well, they're highly politically divided, but where are the commonalities that they have? And if the only commonalities they have is the workplace and achieving goals together in the workplace, then maybe that's what you need to focus on. The more they focus on that, the less time they have to dwell in the sadness of the other aspects of their life, or in this case, the anger that they dwell on in their life because of the political divisions that they each bring into the workplace.
Well, let me give you a little bit of advice, Stephen. If that conversation ever comes up again, tell those people to come to Ukraine, where we are all in unison of our disdain, disgust, and hatred for Donald Trump.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting what unifies people. I mean, I was amazed. I was living in Australia when 9/11 happened. And I'm absolutely amazed by the Australians who came around. I was one of the few Americans that they knew, and how they coalesced and came to me to make sure I was okay. And if I was personally impacted by what happened, by the events of 9/11. And I came back to the United States a couple of months later, and I was amazed at the unity I saw in the United States at that point in time. But I don't see it today, I'll be honest with you. I mean, that's what, 15, 14 years ago, I guess, or so. Or no, that was
25 years ago.
24 years ago. Yeah, 24 years ago. So, things move on, and unfortunately move on in a bad direction, but also sometimes they can move on in a good direction. I mean, I guess that's the only thing you can tell people is, look at the devastation Japan went through at the tail end of World War II. And it took them many, many years. But, look at what a mostly unified country Japan is today, a unified society Japan is today, and all within one lifetime, which is pretty amazing. And people just don't have that historical perspective sometimes. I mean, in all of our lifetime, everyone looking around the room, maybe Sandra's the youngest one here, but I remember in my lifetime, the issues around school busing issues in the United States, and in my community growing up in Las Vegas, and, parents being outraged that the people are going to be bused into our schools. Well, you know what? The adults were all upset about it, but most of our kids, when people came to our schools, like, hey, yeah, this guy plays pretty good basketball. I want him on my team on the playground. I want to pick Jimmy Jones. I don't care what his skin color is. That man can hoop. I want him on my team. It didn't impact us as kids as much as it impacted our parents, who were outraged, unfortunately. I don't have the Harry Potter's magic wand to fix things, other than to say, the way we perceive things, the mindset that we bring, and if we more of a growth mindset that we can bring, not a positive mindset, not an optimistic mindset, but a growth mindset that we can bring to a situation, the more clarity we can get and move forward in a more positive manner than not.
Let's go around to everybody. I need everybody to jump in here. Ron?
Chris, I'm curious, can you carry on a meaningful dialogue with the Ukrainians, meaning that I don't know how many decades, centuries of culture that have brought them to this point, but if you had a very meaningful dialogue, who knows, it could take a couple of weeks to peel back the onion, so to speak, to determine why they do what they do, such that you might be able to offer some better avenues to take, health and mindset and so forth?
Good question. I mean, what I've, now that I've been here for over 2.5 years, and Stephen knows this, and anyone who's been an expat, a leader, and an executive in an expatriate role, you can't surrender your culture, but you cannot, just become seduced and, immersed into their culture. So, there is a kind of a confluence of them, and you've got to be able to lead and get objectives. And so that's one of the reasons why I made the conscious decision to never learn Ukrainian nor speak it. And I'm able to utilize the good and bad of Soviet culture, which what this is. There is we don't say Russian Orthodox over here anymore, Stephen. You know,
I understand
but
that.
but what we so I you know, and in times of crisis, it's all about clarity, conviction, vision, easy to understand, baby steps, not lurches, and incremental improvements to get us from one situation to the other. So I paint a relatively ambitious goal of where we're going, but along the way, I have metrics that enable us to show them that there's success, that they're a part of something that is different than what they've known. Very radical, but not threatening. You know, that we respect their opinions. It isn't like, and Stephen, who's lived in Asia, knows it's not I'm the head, you're the hands. You know, you ask their input, recognizing that their culture doesn't enable them at lower levels to give significant input. But the fact that you're a leader or a boss is actually asking them that gives them validation and encouragement. And these sound like sophomoric baby steps for those of us in the West, but it's a really foreign and literally and a new way of thinking. And you're doing that, but you're also doing it in a country at war where everybody has relatives or friends that are fighting on the front lines. So, you know, you can't be enthusiastic about what we're doing, but yet you say, you know, this is we're very satisfied with the reception of the customers. Our expansion is being driven by client demand. You know, we're ahead of our projections on, you know, figures and metrics, and you did this, you did this, you did this. That's great. I'll tell you, you know, I used to say I'm quick to condemn, but quick to compliment. You don't condemn people here, and you that's the worst damn thing you can do, is shatter somebody by condemning them. And you know, having lived in Hong Kong for 29 years, you know, there's a lot of similarities between the Chinese culture and the Soviet culture. And had I not lived and built a global company out of Hong Kong, I don't know if I'd be as prepared as I am today for it. But you know, back to your real question, Ron, you know, it is an evolving philosophy that I'm having to recalibrate every day to, you know, get in alignment with our base and bring them along, make sure that they understand what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and why we're going to do it. And the most important thing, I know Stephen talks about this, and it's so effing obvious, is honesty. You know, and of course, everybody's honest. But I started off by saying small things where everybody could trust me, because the default position in Soviet culture is you don't trust anybody. So I realized early on, the only way they were going to be able to trust me is if I'm consistent, and if I made small little boasts, small little claims, and kept them. And by doing that, you gain their trust. And when they start to trust you, that is when they internally feel connected and committed to it. And you know, we have one of our staff who's going on a much needed vacation next week, and she's concerned because she's a branch manager. She's concerned that I won't be able to manage the store without her. And I told her, I said, you know, I've been in this business for damn near 40 years. I think, I think somehow I'm going to be able to manage this. And she's concerned. She almost wants to cancel her vacation because she doesn't think that I will be able to manage an individual store. So that's a long answer to a short question. And Ron, I hope I answered some of those. And Stephen, please, back to you.
No, I think you're on the right track, Chris. The only thing I would consider having a one-on-one conversation with you is how you remain your authentic self. And if your authentic self is, hey, you want to celebrate the wins, I think you've been there long enough you've established credibility and trust with your employees. I wouldn't hide that necessarily behind you. I would figure ways of exhibiting that in ways that part of the message might be, I mean, what are their concerns? Their concerns about maybe job security. Well, as your business grows, the job security increases, and you're celebrating the 2-year anniversary and 3-year anniversaries of your employees, or 5 years, however it is. But don't be inauthentic. Be yourself. You may need to modify that a little bit. I'm not the outgoing American, boisterous American. When I go to Japan, I kind of downplay it and wear a coat and tie and be very Japanese in my approach, or American Japanese in my approach. But I'm still me. So that's the only thing I would add to that.
Before we get further, Sandra, what do you think of this conversation? Is it helpful to you? Do you want to add something to this at this point?
I would love to add into the conversation, to be honest, but since I don't know really what Chris's challenges are in his business and what he's looking for, I would probably give a bad opinion. But let's say, if we talk in general from what I've been hearing, this is what I would like to add into the general conversation. I think a lot of the epidemic that we've been creating is the happy epidemic for the longest time. I've been wanting to say this for the longest time, but people did not see it until now. We're struggling through the consequences of not using the right language for what we're having as a problem. Let's say using the word problem makes people feel uncomfortable. And they say, no, use challenge. When we strive, we push reality to the side and we go into focus on the positive and do this and look, we're going to achieve it. And look, we've done this in the past, and so on and so on. I believe it takes away the ability from people to process the problem, process grief. It takes them away from their communication skills, from problem solving. And it all comes down, in my opinion, into minimizing the issue at hand. And I believe strongly, in my very personal opinion, that a lot of the issues that we have here in the West is because we have taken people away from the power of problem solving by using the real facts of the situation, by saying it's a challenge. Well, why is it a challenge? Isn't it really a problem, the fact that you cannot communicate with a person and say, look, this is a problem because this, and this. And instead say, it's a challenge. Well, we'll solve it. It's not helping people now. Right now, this is what I see moving back. This is what I've noticed. People no longer listen if it's not positive. People don't want to listen because they think they already know the answer to your problem. They want to help you by being positive. And I don't feel that that's helping people. In my opinion, I cannot say people, some people. Again, it's based on my repatriation. I've seen this over and over. And that's what I have to say in general, but not in Chris's situation. It sounds like his is bigger. It's based on Ukraine. So I cannot give an opinion based on that. But thank you for asking.
You bet. Thank you for that. Chris, how many miles approximately is it from you to where the war zone is?
Today or earlier in the week?
5 minutes ago.
I would say that we're probably about 250, 300 miles from the most active parts, but earlier this week, I was actually in Dnipro, and in Sinaloa, whereas it's not on the U.S. news very much anymore, but Dnipro was severely hit on Monday, Tuesday with ballistic missiles. Not really, Ron, they're not really ballistic, I know. Okay. Just, yeah, just down, Tiger. But
Some of them
you know,
are.
but it's you can't really parse words with people when 24 people are killed and they hit a hospital and stuff like that. So it's but as I tell people, it's tomorrow we have a funeral. This will be 125 in a town of 20,000. When people say, oh, well, at least you're far from the front lines. Well, tomorrow, when I'm putting flowers on that casket and I see that mother and that wife and those children crying and clutching a casket where the paramedics are standing at the ready because there's maybe 3 out of 10 times they faint, then try telling them how far away they are from it. So, it's a complicated question. Yeah, yes. I mean, we here in Kremenets, we don't get hit very much. I was in Kyiv last week, which, had hundreds and hundreds of drones and projectiles coming into it at night. And so, but it's an impact, bad choice of words, but you're dealing with families who the front is as close as the photo on their mantelpiece.
Yeah. So I'm in San Diego, and
Which is safe.
yeah, of course,
San Diego's safe.
but just about distance where the bombs are falling. Phoenix is like 350 miles or something like that. It's a 6.5, 7 hour drive when we go over to Phoenix. And
This would be like San Diego to Bakersfield, San Diego to Oxnard, Ventura. This would be Las Vegas to Reno, San Francisco to Stockton. This would be Houston to
Dallas.
Dallas. This would be Houston to Dallas. David, where are you?
I am in
You're in San Francisco. I see Salesforce Tower. David Ick.
I'm in San Diego suburbs.
Okay, and Ron.
And I'm 90 minutes south of Washington, D.C.
Okay, all right. So this would be if you're like in say Roanoke, this would be Roanoke to Charlotte,
Mm-hmm.
Roanoke to Philadelphia.
so this is the first time that I'm hearing how close, I mean, learning from you, how close the war is. Yeah, Dave.
So there's a lot of layers of where Chris is coming from on this. There's the front, the ground war, there's the air war with the missiles, and then there's the war that comes home when soldiers or people that are killed on the front or in a bombing, that they're buried, that the funeral is in your town, Kremenets. I've got a call coming up here in a couple minutes and I'm going to have to run. But I wanted to mention a couple things with Chris, and you can take it as you wish. So I have a lot of experience in that larger part of the world, and Soviet is a 20th century construct. I say a couple things. Culturally, you're in a really old part of the world. It's centuries, thousands of years that people have been there. And I think you're really in where the Habsburg Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, you're on the eastern side of it, the bloodlands, so there's an old history of conflict, of being swapped out of one empire for another empire, and usually on the business end of a sharp stick. Okay, so people are the history that is so deep culturally, and the approach to life is different. My experience was Russians, Ukrainians around the Union. They would see Americans as relatively shallow, wonderful people, very practical, very pragmatic, which is something that they wanted more of in their lives, but maybe spiritually not well connected, kind of disconnected. So they were willing to go for what helped them in their lives, and you're doing that. I mean, you're providing something constructive. Is it positive? For sure. Um, I just wanted to make a couple comments there. That it's an old part of the world, much older than we Americans. So, I mean, we've forgotten our European roots. It's um, it's not so much British, but different religions that wanted to get the hell out of Europe. A very different perspective, and we can go back a few hundred years. 200 years in that part of Ukraine is nothing. I mean, you go back a couple chapters in empires.
So you wind up in where the Fiddler on the Roof was.
Well, I'm not an expert on that one. Culturally, I'm bankrupt. But it's
Well, remember, Isaac Stern was born here in Kremenetz. So for any of you that are lovers of Fiddler on the Roof, Isaac Stern, one of his favorite things, and David, you're right. This town of Kremenetz, it traces its origin date 800 years ago, 1227. It's an
wow.
800-year-old town.
Yeah. And you can find bits and pieces of it. If you look for it, the locals will show you, yeah.
Oh, the roads are so bad here. The roads are filled with it.
Oh man.
Dave, would
Hang
you
in there.
like to
Keep going.
Dave?
What's that?
My youngest brother, Dave.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm listening. I'm impressed by the almost the sameness of the knowledge that each of these participants has delivered this morning about small steps and achieving the goal and adapting to culture and being sensitive to culture. To me, this is what I learned was what was called 360-degree thinking. When you go into a situation, and I've, if you will, parachuted into crisis situations that developed in the middle of the night. Granted, I was in the news business, so it wasn't quite the same thing as being on the front line. It was being 3 steps behind the front line, but it was understanding all of the 6,000 steps that had to be accomplished before you could get your pictures on the air, and all of the steps that had to be done. But they're all binary decisions. They're all I do this to do that. I say yes here to say no there. These are all steps to take. If you listen to there was a speech not long ago by Jamie Dimon, the head of Chase, JP Morgan Chase. And he said, I do one thing at a time. I may have 150 things to do, but I do them one at a time. And if you come out here to Silicon Valley, they expect you to do 150 things all at once and not worry about the one, except for the bosses who can only do one thing at a time. So, thank you, Stephen. So, I mean, part of it is understanding that and change. I also work in change management more these days than I do in communication. And part of it is understanding that you're not going to get agreement 100%. And it's finding the points of agreement among all the disagreeables that will help you achieve what your objective may be. And that there are no problems, there are only opportunities to create more problems.
Well, thank you. Steve, the book, the book is free, you wrote. The book is free from today through Monday at the Kindle store.
Yeah, so it's available as an ebook for free for the last few days of June. I did that in conjunction. This is Brain Awareness Month. It's also Men's Health Awareness Month in the United States, and so I did it in combination with those two things. So it's ranked number 2 this morning in Kindle in terms of business decision making. So kind of pleased with that. But yeah, so anyone wants it, go to the Kindle store and look for the book title, and you can download it for free now through sometime on Monday afternoon, United States time.
So, what's next for you, Steve?
Immediately next is I recorded a 15-minute video this morning for a TV channel, which I need to go edit. That'll take me in the next 2 hours, I think, to edit that. I had to do a lot of takes. My voice was a bit raspy this morning. What's next is I'm just, I'm going to have another writing summer here in Arizona, putting my head down and focusing on my next book, which I'll really dive into. I've got it outlined. I've got binders full of notes, got my thoughts together, and I need to start putting pen to paper, and I'll start writing it Monday or Tuesday next week. So and that'll take me most of the summer to get the first draft of that book done. So that's what's next for me.
Sandra, I want to take a bold step here of being a salesman and PR. That if you ever want to write a book about your experiences in Saudi and coming back, Stephen is an expert at helping people put books together.
Well,
Thank you. I'll keep
Sandra,
that in mind. Yeah.
and I will offer you some free advice, not on writing here, but since I went to a situation with my father with early stage Alzheimer's, and you mentioned you and your husband both have elderly parents, again, I guess struggling with it as well. As a couple of things is patience is critical when you're dealing with your elderly parent. I used to drive my father for his monthly cardiovascular check-in, and we drive past the same apartment complex, which had been finished building, and people were moving in. And Dad, every time when we stopped at the 4-way stop sign, he'd say, "Oh, look, son, that complex is coming along. It looks like it's almost ready." And he did that for like 12 consecutive months. So yeah, Dad, it looks like they're making good progress. I didn't correct him. I didn't say, "No, Dad, you're wrong." That's one of the things I learned from experience. One of the things I counsel some of my friends who are now dealing with elderly parents as well is, don't correct them, just go along with it. And yeah, you're right, and go on with it. The second thing is they tend to say some very nasty things to you and about you. And, my father said some the most heartbreaking things to me I've ever heard a human being say to my face. And, but I had to get past that and realize that made, at first I thought, well, that's what he really thinks about me. And here I am trying to take care of him. And, it took me a while, and I talked to some professionals about it, and they said, look, think of the real him was the one that you knew, the one you loved, the one you had the deep conversations with, not the one who is now saying things that that may not really be how he feels about you. So just a couple of pieces of free advice that situations you might encounter as you deal with this, because being the child of a parent struggling with Alzheimer's or dementia is financially devastating, it's emotionally devastating, and it's mentally devastating. And you just have to build on all your resources. And fortunately, you've got a husband there to support one another, so that will help. But
That's very helpful, Dave.
Thank you, Stephen.
There were a couple of things that I noticed when I would on rare occasions be out in the San Diego area dealing with our father, Ed's and my father. And one of them was the medical office where he would go for his cardiovascular checkup, which would have a blackboard outside the examination rooms. Today's date is Friday, June 27th. Tomorrow is Saturday, June 28th. Where it was all sort of laying out was sort of building a foundation for the patient to live in. And the thing that brought all that home to me was that my father would then ask questions. He would say, and first off, he would call me Ed, which so he may not have recognized you, but he knew who you were. He didn't know who I was. And but he asked the questions. What is today's date? What is tomorrow's date? What doctor are we going to see? Does he like to be called this or that? So he had a situational awareness, but it was a very narrowly focused and very targeted one so that he could sort of skate through his meeting with the doctor and, sort of not get yelled at for not being as smart as he was the last time he saw him. So the bad news is you got a lot of bad days ahead of you. The good news is that you have good memories.
Good advice.
Well, I
Yeah,
didn't know.
Steve and I, my father had Alzheimer's, and the one statement you made that he can those who have are under subject to Alzheimer's can make some very coherent statements, yet those coherent statements are very, very caustic. I had to learn over a period of time that I don't think my father was responsible for any word he said after they left his lips, so to speak. I don't know that they were, well, I guess they were intentional thoughts, but I don't know that he had any lasting thought about those caustic comments that he just made. And I'm interested in any insights you may have about that.
Yeah, I don't think, and if he was, the way I learned to do it, maybe that's 5% of the way he thought about me. But when he first said it, I thought that's 100% of the way he thinks about me. That's what he really thinks. Those are deep, true thoughts that are coming through. And you think about it in retrospect. I mean, the man is suffering from very serious brain illness, and why would that be the true him? I mean, when the brain's being so badly impacted. So yeah, like all of it. I mean, we all have positive and negative feelings about almost all of us. I mean, I'm sure people have, things I do are well, and they may have a few negative comments about me as well, and so it's like, well, maybe they were true comments, but that wasn't the whole perspective, and that's what I had to learn. That wasn't maybe the foundation of his thinking about me. But yeah, at the time they were hurtful, and I mean and it was only after he passed when I talked to some professionals I came to understand that, and now I'm able to give that advice. I've got a very close friend of mine whose mother passed away recently from Alzheimer's, and she went through the same thing. So over the last 6 months, I've been talking with her, and I know the mom. I mean, we grew up together in Las Vegas, and so I know the family quite well. So I've been giving her that same advice. That don't worry about what she says today. Just focus on those, as David Cohen said, focus on those good memories, and you always got those good memories.
The challenge you have is that there's no, it's not like a physical ailment, a physical cancer that you have a timeline, basically. With Alzheimer's, they call it the long goodbye for a reason, because it's a very long goodbye in many cases.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's also kind of like one of the advice that I got from somebody was, he said, "Well, didn't your father ever call you stupid as a kid?" I said, "Yeah, many times." "Well, does he really think you were stupid?" "No, just maybe I was doing something stupid at the time." So it wasn't his true belief that I was a stupid kid and I didn't grow up to be a stupid adult. So put in that perspective, put in that kind of context. So maybe in his fading days, he may have thought something about me, but that wasn't necessarily everything he thought about me. So anyway, just I wanted to share that with Sandra because I see others being impacted by that. And Ron, thanks for sharing your situation, because I've talked to others, and it's just part of the process. It's part of the disease. It's likely to happen.
Well,
Yeah.
did you find anything that he was more responsive, more alert, more in tune with other things that were going on? Was there some segment of his life that, if you will, lit him up?
Yeah, I mean, my father grew up in Chicago, and he was a big boxing fan. Used to go to a lot of fights. My father could tell you who won a fight at the Chicago arena in September of 1953 or something. And he'd tell you what round it ended in. But he couldn't tell you what he had for breakfast yesterday. So, if I could talk to him about old movies were a passion of his, particularly Westerns. He grew up as a child watching that. He was also an author. He wrote fiction. So if I talked to him about books, I could talk to him about movies. I could talk to him about boxing and a little bit about current affairs. He still watched a lot of news. He could have some of the time a conversation about politics, or every year he'd watch the State of the Union speech. Didn't matter who the president was. He felt that was his way of being informed about what was happening in the country. So things like that, but other things you just shied away from talking about.
Ed, did you notice anything? You were closer to him in his final years.
That's a really good question. And the final years were painful for me. Um, so when they were living in Oceanside, before he was before he entered that facility
Yeah.
in what a little town called Encinitas nearby.
Up a little.
Yeah, north of downtown San Diego, 30 miles or something. But it's a very nice place, um, upscale and well done, lots of services. He had no idea who I was, and his just before that. Uh, he lost control of himself, uh, control of eating, and personal care. And,
Well, he also lost his situational awareness when they moved to El Camino, that that he would like to go for a walk in the middle of the night.
I didn't. I wasn't really aware of that, frankly.
That's what started the road to Encinitas, if you will.
Okay.
And I got involved because the challenge that you face, in addition to the painfulness of the situation, is that you deal with a whole other world of financial obligations. And in California at the time, we were able to get Dad onto Medi-Cal, which wasn't easy, but we found a good lawyer who did that and made it at minimal cost to us, where it was basically his Social Security check, whatever it was, paid for the Alzheimer's care that he was receiving in Encinitas. But that was when I got involved with the Alzheimer's Association and learned all of this stuff. And it's the kind of thing that at the time, for a 45-year-old who wants to go screaming down the hallway and saying, "Why me? What did I do to deserve this? I hope this is not hereditary." That was the biggest thing. I hope this was not hereditary.
So, the-
Well, let's end on a positive note. And the good
Yeah.
news is for all of us that some simple lifestyle changes will help reduce our risk. It can't necessarily prevent it, but and it goes back to the reducing stress is probably number one, eating healthier. Ed, I admire the fact that at 80 years old, you're still doing daily walks there. That's wonderful.
well, we did. Well, I wouldn't do it on my own, but she's, Joanne is a fullback, walking, dragging me along, basically. But we walk in beautiful places, and so it's mentally stimulating, very
Yep.
relaxing. Shelter Island and Harbor Island, and both of them are different areas of San Diego Harbor. It's just beautiful places, and that's inspirational.
It is. The other thing is the better your social life, it reduces your risk as well. So I mean, one of the things I didn't do with my father, and I unfortunately I learned this too late, was being a writer, he was very sedentary. I could kind of get him to walk sometimes, but mostly he just want to sit around and watch old movies on TV. And he never engaged with people socially other than family members. You really need to engage with people outside your family on a regular basis. So whether that, that's probably one of the benefits of like senior centers and stuff like that, is to go and just talk with people, or, to talk with strangers, or have some friendships outside the family are extremely important. And that's one of the other things that we can all do. It's an area I lack, quite frankly. That's one of the reasons I come to these shows a lot. I get to interact with you guys. It stimulates my brain a little bit. But having those friendships outside the family are extremely important, as well as all the basic health stuff. Reducing your weight, reducing your cholesterol, reducing your blood sugar in your blood. A little bit of exercise and meditation does help.
So one of the good things about Dad, just thinking back, one of the really good things, he was, when he was a young man, he was an athlete, and played football and played all the sports, but he was at the time, as a young man, very strong football runner. And I happened to be fortunate to inherit that pocket of strength. So I just had recently a bone density X-ray thing. Okay, and I didn't ask for it. I got a note from the doc saying, "Get this done," because people who are at my age usually fall and break things. And so anyway, I had it done. So it came out that I had the bone density, and this was about a year ago, of a 25-year-old, when I was 79. So, and I haven't broken anything since, so I'm still there. So it's great. And then I had at that time a PSA test. I've got another one coming up this fall, and it was like almost zero. And so, thankfully. So, Stephen, as we come to a close here, on page 203, chapter 11, the impact of mindfulness for leaders.
The impact of mindfulness on what? I didn't hear the end of that.
Well, the impact of mindfulness for leaders. Mindfulness. The chapter talks about these CEOs of giant companies and how important that is in their organizations, and leave us with some thoughts about how that attitude is implemented inside a large organization.
Okay, well, just for your audience, let's distinguish. There's a difference between mindfulness and meditation. So you can be very mindful without meditating. Meditation is a way of getting to greater mindfulness. It's a tool, if you will, for becoming more mindful, but it's not mandatory. So what we're talking about here, mindfulness is that presence, that understanding, it's that awareness, and particularly the awareness that you're under stress, that it's, somebody's in the workplace, people come up to you all the time, I need a decision on this. And one of the things I suggest to people they do is say, well, wait a second, I need X. I need 30 minutes to think about this. Is that okay? And most of the time people come back and, oh yeah, 30 minutes, but sometimes I'll say, I need 3 days to think about this. As a consultant, I'll say that. And they'll say, oh, geez, I need something tomorrow. I'm working with a guy right now who's putting together a reorganization plan. And we talked on Wednesday and he wants to present it to his boss today. So he sent it to me, yesterday. And I said, well, geez, can I get a couple days to think about this? He says, no, I need to know about this afternoon. Okay. But at least I bought myself some time. I bought myself a few hours. I didn't have to reply immediately. So we think we have to make on the spot decisions all the time. And sometimes we do, there's no doubt about it. And certainly, Ron's situation as a fighter pilot, you're making on the spot. You can't, hey, Mr. Pilot of the other plane, can I take 30 minutes to think about how I'm going to maneuver this thing? No, you got to make on the spot decisions. Sometimes you do. And in the workplace, there are things you have to decide immediately, but not everything. So one of the things I suggest people do is say, hey, I need time to think about this. Set some boundaries and give your time to reflect on it and get out of that binary decision-making mode that your brain's going to go into automatically. This is a physiological aspect of your brain. It will go into binary decision-making mode unless you make it stop. The other thing about this, and I'll just do it real fast, the emotional center of our brain is at the back of our brain, the amygdala. The rational center of our brain is at the front, the prefrontal cortex. When we're under stress, when we're getting highly emotional or emotionally engaged, whether it's happiness to sadness, the emotional part of our brain takes over. And that's what causes us to make less than optimal decisions. The prefrontal cortex is no longer in charge. However, if you consciously stop, it takes approximately 10 seconds for you to say to your brain, stop, pause. I need to get under control. I need to breathe in. That's the other thing you do. Take deep breath. In about 10 seconds, the prefrontal cortex will now be back in charge. Funny enough, and when I was a child, my mother used to say things like, Stephen, you can't hit another child. You can't throw things. Count to 10 when you get angry. Well, counting to 10 is approximately 8 seconds. And it's that old mother's tale, so to speak, is very true. If you take those 10 seconds to get yourself under control, you'll make a more optimal decision. So in the workplace, one of the best ways to get under control would be, okay, I think I hear you saying, can you repeat those 3 things again? And while they're repeating it, your brain is now going from emotional reaction mode, like there's a snake at your feet, to response mode. Okay, this is a situation. I can either make a decision now or I can decide to make a decision later. And you can calm yourself down in those 10 seconds. And that's why mindfulness is so critical.
Thank you.
Chandler, good luck to you with
Thank
your
you.
parents.
Great discussion. Thank you for this opportunity.
Stephen, I
Sir.
mean, can I use that information as a middle manager?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, I was a CEO until you demoted me last
That's
week.
right. I just caught that because I responded and I reacted. I didn't respond. You're right, Chris. Now that I've understood, I made a comment. I did a story a few episodes ago, and I said, Chris, let's assume you're the middle manager, and he's not going to forgive me for that. So, but I won't put it on your tombstone, Chris. I'll put CEO on. I won't put.
Both should not be applied, but Stephen, thank you so much for this. It's just critical and just, and the issue of sleep, getting enough sleep in Alzheimer's. There's a huge link with that too, isn't there?
It is. The sleep is another one of the things there are a couple other things we can talk about, but we didn't get into, but yeah. And it's not the amount of sleep, it's the quality of your sleep that's important. And we're all different. We all need a different amount of sleep. And the other thing though, speaking of that, and this is why I want to move to Spain in my elderly years, is that taking an afternoon siesta, taking that is highly good. A power nap in the afternoon is a great way to refresh your brain. And I do that when I'm not in like a classroom teaching or in a client office. Here at home, I guarantee you between 4 or 5 o'clock every afternoon, I'm taking a 20 to 30-minute nap if I can, because it resets my brain. And the other thing about mindfulness, Ed, I'll kind of close on this, is understanding yourself. I know because I'm an early morning person. I get up very early. I start working, when the sun comes up, basically. I make very bad decisions after 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or actually after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, are less than optimal decisions. So if somebody comes to me and needs a decision and I haven't had my power nap, I automatically say, I need time to think. I can't get back to you tomorrow. I will make a better recommendation, a better advice, a better decision the next morning than if I try to make one then, because my brain's tired and I know that. And if we all understand that about ourselves, there are going to be peaks and valleys during the day when we know we make optimal decisions, and there's times when we don't make optimal decisions. So that's part of mindfulness, is understanding ourselves.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandra, for joining us. and
A
particip-
delivery on Monday.
Thank you for
Then we do
inviting
all
me.
those sections, guys.
Pardon me?
What was that?
I heard
Thank
somebody,
you,
but
Stephen. Brilliant. Take
I
care,
don't-
everyone. Great to reconnect with you.
I don't know
All
who
right.
that was.
Somebody
Thank
said
you.
something about Monday. I don't know who it was. All right. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you.